I don't think it's unreasonable to say that him being in the room with the whole committee and then leaving the room is not totally sufficient. Like, that's got to bring a certain level of bias. It's like he's on the jury and then just left the room for a minute and then came right back. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barwick. This is another episode of Moving the Goalpost. You can follow us across social media. You can follow us across social media at MTGPETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can listen to this show wherever you get your Moving the Goalpost, wherever you get your podcast. You can watch this show on YouTube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench podcasts on ETBpodcast.com. And make sure to listen to Moving the Goalpost wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, this show is, this show is presented by Playback. Stay tuned for later in the show to find out more. All right, so we have a lot of controversy in the NCAA tournament. March Madness is finally back, and there's a whole lot of controversy about UNC getting into the tournament. Everybody seems to be jumping on this bandwagon a little bit, based on their resume against quad one opponents and things like that. They were 1-12 against quad one opponents, and to be honest, I haven't followed enough of UNC basketball throughout the season to really be, or the other teams that they were competing with, to really be to have that strong of an opinion about it myself. So I guess I kind of see both sides of the argument. I don't know what your thoughts on this were. If you think UNC should have gotten in or not.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on what their criteria is. So for me, how I would look at it, I would have put UNC in the tournament. The problem that they have is the committee has harped on one of their criteria is quad one wins is their biggest criteria, basically. And if you look at that criteria, then North Carolina should be nowhere near the tournament. They had one quad one win. West Virginia had 6. Indiana had 4. I'm an Arizona State fan. Arizona State was atrocious this season, and they had 4 quad one wins. Which is 4 times at UNC. As Penn State, who was awful, had 2 quad one wins. So they had less quad one wins than a lot of terrible teams. I personally think that UNC is a team that has a lot of talent and could make a run actually in this tournament, which we'll get to in a little bit. So by that criteria, I would have put them in. But when the NCAA says this is the criteria, for years, this is the criteria, and then you put a team that is in that's not part of that criteria, then I think that's where they have a problem. I don't have a problem with them making it because I think they're a good team. I more so think that they kind of look bad saying this is our criteria, and then you put a team in who, I mean, no one can argue that they fit the criteria because it's just a fact that they don't.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. So basically, you're arguing it. You're basically saying they shouldn't have gotten in based on the standard that the committee has set.
Right. It's like it's like Alabama, Florida State last year, right? Like Alabama was more primed to do something than Florida State was, but they're going to say, okay, we're going to put this team in over Florida State because Florida State has an injury. But you would say, well, by the criteria of what you need in the season, Florida State should make it.
Well, apparently that's part of the reason West Virginia. That's part of the reason West Virginia got left out. Apparently.
Yeah, I think West Virginia. I mean, a lot of people were saying Indiana. I think West Virginia had a way better gripe than Indiana. I mean, West Virginia had 6 quad one wins. They had about a similar record in quad 2. They had a similar record in quad 3. North Carolina had a little bit better record than them in quad 2, but not much. And they won a bunch of, they went to Kansas and won a game. They won a bunch of games. And so I think West Virginia had the bigger gripe. West Virginia should have been put in. I mean, I could also make the case that West Virginia should have been in over Xavier as well. But I think that West Virginia had a bigger gripe than Indiana.
Yeah, well, Xavier had an injury earlier in the year, right? And now now he's back. I forget his name. And West Virginia also seemingly got left off for that reason because DeVries is out. So that may have been a big part of it. I mean, yeah, UNC is. I think that. Well, I think the big story that people are harping on is, and rightfully so, which is that their AD, what's his name, Bubba Cunningham, is a part of the selection committee. And he was out of the room when it came to the. He was out of the room when it came to the when they were picking UNC. However, I do think there is a little bit of a conflict of interest when the AD is a part of the committee, and they are picking it. Now, I understand he was able to recuse himself from the UNC pick, but I don't know. I mean, I do find it a little hard to believe that didn't have a pretty big factor because he's sitting in with those same people. Just because he was out of the room at the time. I'm not saying that's necessarily the reason they did it. Now, in terms of what you were saying before about the criteria, I like your criteria better than I like committee's criteria. I think that, and that's what it tends to be in college football a little more than in college basketball.
Right.
I mean, look, everybody keeps talking about college football and making it more like college basketball. In a lot of ways, college football does it so much better. I'm a bigger fan of picking the teams that are more primed to make a run than strictly based on these technicalities. That's what makes selection committees so great. That's why college sports are so great. And in many ways better than, like, I like the college way of selecting teams better than the professional way of selecting teams with like standings and records and things like that. I like the nuance of it. And making arguments, which is why I love college football. It goes on all year. So I agree with you. I would rather have that be the standard than all of these weird sort of created technicalities of quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. I don't like it that much.
Right. Well, and also, like, if me and you were on the committee and in a hypothetical scenario, and there was, you left the room and Sacred Heart is on the bubble, or I left the room and Arizona State is on the bubble, I'd be still more likely to put Sacred Heart in just because that's the way the nature of the world works, where you have people who are friends, like these people are here, sitting in a lot. You want to help a friend out or whatever. Like, I agree that I don't think that they're recusing himself. I don't know how big of an impact it had, but he also got a $130,000 bonus because he gets a bonus if North Carolina make the tournament. So I agree, he recused himself. I don't think that he himself influenced it, said anything to influence it, but I just think that was helpful in influencing it. And I also think one thing that a lot of people don't mention about what also influenced it, if he was the AD of if he was the AD of Colorado, and they decide to put Colorado in, I think that would be an influence. Another thing that influences this is North Carolina. This is one of the biggest brands in all of college basketball. And when you have North Carolina on the bubble, there's going to be that influence of it's North Carolina.
Yeah. And that's true in all college sports. There's a certain level of brand bias.
Of course.
And in fairness, is realistically, is North Carolina a top 68 team? I would say yes.
Yes.
Realistically, yes.
There's a lot of teams that didn't make the tournament that are a top 68 team, but because of, automatic qualifiers, if they just took the top 68 teams, there would be almost no small schools in the tournament.
Right. If realistically you're taking the top 68 teams, very few smalls. Yeah, there would be very few. Well, maybe there would be it's impossible to with 68 teams, it obviously is not their goal to pick the top 68 teams. in terms of the
Right.
realistically the best.
That's why they have the resumes. Yeah.
Right. That's why they have the resumes. However, if you're comparing a bunch of bubble teams that don't have automatic bids, I am a much bigger believer in picking who is more likely to make a run. That's how I think it should be, rather than a whole bunch of technicalities. I like the nuance of the whole thing. My only question about UNC is, how common is this scenario? Because is it just UNC's AD that is on the committee?
No, very common. Even the college football playoff committee has people that have to recuse themselves.
Yeah.
So it's very common, because every person that's on these committees has probably worked in a college in some capacity, and that's why they, it may be multiple colleges, and that's why they're on this committee, because they have experience.
Their connections in a way make them qualified.
Yeah. There's influence all over. It's just magnify when stuff like this happens. But yeah.
And by the way, we you wanted to talk about this. They UNC got called for a lane violation against Duke. Duke was playing without Cooper Flagg, and
Correct.
UNC made a huge comeback in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
We have the audio of it, for whatever it's worth. We can't play the video because of copyright issues, but we have the audio.
Oh, no. A whistle that won't. Oh, no. And North Carolina moving there in the lane.
Jalen Withers tried to fake a lane violation.
Withers with the violation. He moved. And despite the make, which would have tied it, they wave it off. And a critical mistake, maybe. Hits 7 threes. Makes a mistake in the lane there.
Oh. All right. So that there it was.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, a lot of people were using this to say, well, look how close UNC was to beating Duke. First of all, Duke destroyed UNC in the 2 regular season games they played, and there was no Cooper Flagg. So Duke is way better than UNC. But yes, Duke was up, I think, 22 at halftime. They were way back, came way back. You're down 1, and okay, there's a few things I think about this. First of all, it was not everyone I'm sure has seen it right now. He moved his foot in like this. It was not an egregious lane violation where somebody's getting in the if he jumped into the lane. I think that when you have a team, most people knew, I mean, this is not how the ref should ref a game, but most people knew that UNC's season was coming down to these games. When it's March, it's excitement. It's about to tie a UNC Duke game in March that could lead to UNC's season. There has to be a little bit looser calls. And that was not an egregious lane violation. It was that he faked his foot into the lane. It did not affect anything during the play. If they had not called it, it would not have been talked about. UNC probably still would not have won the game, but if they had won that game and they didn't call that lane violation, we would not be having the conversation we just had before. And the other thing that I have to say is there is, the rule is that you can get back before the guy shoots it. And it looked very close whether he got back before the guy shoots it. They go to 10-minute reviews to look at, did it come off this guy's pinky at the very end? The fact that they then can't review something like this in a situation like that, even if it would have got called, the fact that it couldn't be reviewed when this is the rule that it could, if he got back before police, I think is also crazy, which I think there's stuff like that in football too, where they can review every single thing, but they can't review this. The fact that we can go to 10-minute reviews, which is a detriment to March, these reviews, and then you have a situation like that where there's no review and it's just basically a call that went through. I don't like that either. And I just think March, you have to really swallow the whistle sometimes unless it's egregious. And this was not egregious.
Okay. I agree with that last part. I think what you're saying about officiating in general is true to some degree. Like, The only thing there are certain levels of leeway that they allow, like in the NBA, for instance, they allow teams the game to get a lot more physical than they do in the regular season and things like that, and they give teams a bit more leeway on judgment calls. The only thing I would ever say about officiating in any sport is mainly football and basketball, because baseball, it's all pretty black and white. But I would say no matter what sport, the officiating has to be consistent throughout the game. So people were talking about, remember the BYU Utah game in football, when BYU got called for this really ticky-tacky, like pass interference. And it was something that they really weren't calling the whole. My issue with it was that they weren't really calling it the entire game. And then at the last minute, they all of a sudden call like these little nothings. Which is an issue that I have. The only issue I have with this, with what you're saying about this lane violation, is would they have called it in the first quarter?
I don't know.
Well, right. Okay. Like, I think that this was a clear lane violation that they probably would have called at any point in the game. That they would. Now, I agree with you about the replay. I agree with you about the review, that they should be able to review it. That it makes no sense that they can do that when it comes to balls getting out of being knocked out of bounds, but you can't do it with a lane violation. You should be able to do it with a lane violation. But this was a pretty clear lane violation. And if they would have called this in the first half, they would have called this within the first 10 minutes. So to me, if you would have called that in the first 10 minutes, well, then you have to call that, you have to be consistent throughout the whole game. Now, it's not like the NBA where in the regular season where they just allow lane violations to happen. College basketball refs are a little different.
And also, you brought up the NBA earlier. NBA officiating is a joke too. So, they don't call anything. They don't call moving screens. They don't call travels ever. I mean, the NBA officiating is a joke.
Yeah, and they don't call travels I think it's probably because like the refs kind of have good relationships with a lot of the players.
Well, the biggest, this is so off topic of basketball, but just real quick, the biggest example that I could think of, which you would probably know of recent times, we talk about reffing the same thing the whole game, was when they missed a very clear hold on the Chiefs, and then the next possession called a hold on Sauce Gardner that was borderline a hold that cost the Jets that game. That was the most like not calling it the same way that you've ever seen. But I do agree that the game should be called the same way. But I just feel they should have blown the whistle, just like I felt swallowed the whistle, just like I felt last year. They shouldn't have called that offensive foul on UConn in the women's Final Four last seconds. I think these ticky-tack ones, sometimes you have to swallow them.
No, I agree that like some of them you have to swallow. I think, and by the way, all I've ever said is that they should be consistent throughout the game. That's all I ever said. And if something is a clear lane violation, which I think this was, I thought a very clear lane violation, which maybe they wouldn't have called in the NBA, but in college basketball, they would normally call that, and they would have called it in the first half of the game. Even if the game wasn't on the line, I think they would have called it, which is why I think it's the right call, because I just thought it was too blatant. Like I said, I agree with you on like reviewing it and things like that. I think they should do that. But
I also think this has nothing to do with what was called, but I think this could be something that can change. If the guy makes the shot on a lane violation, if the guy misses a shot and there's a lane violation, then the other team should get the ball. If the guy makes the shot, I think that he should have to redo the shot instead of just automatically giving the ball to the other team.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
If he makes it. Because if he misses it, then it affects the rebound. But if he makes it, then it doesn't affect the rebound because there wouldn't have been one.
Right. I see what you're saying. Moving the goalposts is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, rubbing your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show. I do want to get to the NCAA to our March Madness brackets. So we both made our brackets. We both completed our brackets last night. We could just go through some of it. So our final my final four is hold on, I'm trying to pull it up. I know you. I have Houston winning it all. You have Alabama winning it all, right?
Yeah, I have Alabama. My final four is Houston, Alabama, Texas Tech, and Iowa State.
Yeah, mine is hold on a minute. Mine is Texas A&M, Florida, Duke, and Houston. Going right now, it looks like the East is the weakest by far. I think there's just Duke, Alabama, and kind of everybody else.
I disagree with you on that. Way disagree with you on that.
Okay, who would you say is the weakest?
Well, I have to look at the whole. I would probably take the West, but if you look at the East, so just because you said it was the weakest, is Duke. I think is the best team, one of the best teams in the country. I just have questions about if Cooper Flagg is going to be what his availability is going to be. BYU and VCU, both of those teams you could argue were underseeded. I have VCU winning that game, but VCU probably should have been closer to a 9. Alabama, I have winning the title. I think they have the best offense in the country, one of the best offenses I've seen in college basketball ever. Oregon and Arizona are probably going to meet in the second round. That's an old Pac-12 championship matchup. Those teams are both really good. And Arizona lost a bunch of games at the start of the season, but they played really, really good teams. They've really turned it on. They have Caleb Love in his final season now. If he went back up against Duke, I think that would be great. And you've got Alabama and Wisconsin. And then which I think is going to happen, I have Alabama beating Wisconsin. Then I have Arizona beating Duke. But if Duke were to win, then you have either Alabama-Duke, which would be just a terrific offensive matchup, or Wisconsin and Duke rematch of 10-year-ago final. And I think a pretty good matchup as well in Newark. I think that's a good region. I think if you look at the the West region, Florida is good, but I would have them as the last 1 seed. I have UConn going down in the first round. They're not what they were. Memphis has a guy out. Colorado State, a major guy out. Colorado State are there because they got into a serious run. I think GCU is going to beat Maryland. I have Drake beating Missouri. And then I have, which you're going to disagree, I have Kansas beating Arkansas. And then I have Kansas advancing past St. John's as well. I'm not in love with St. John's as a 2 either. They earned being a 2, but I'm not in love with them.
Okay, so
they have a lot of faults.
Well, I think all of the 2s have. I think all the 2s have a lot. I mean, I do think that St. John's is rightfully a 2 seed. I think there are some other teams that maybe are over or high or overseeded or.
Oh, they're definitely rightfully a 2 seed.
Yeah, overseeded or underseeded. I mean. Like you look at Gonzaga in Georgia, and that's like a 5.5 point spread, and that's
Gonzaga should not have been an 8 seed. Gonzaga should have been higher than yes.
Yeah, they should have been higher than that.
They were top third. They were top 15 team in KenPom.
Yeah, I mean, now I don't agree with you about the 1 seeds that Florida is the weakest. I think Florida is one of the best. Auburn, but if you were to ask me which 1 seed is the weakest, I would say it's Auburn right now. I think Auburn right now is the weakest 1 seed. They lost like 3 of their last 4 games. I understand they play in a tough conference. So
they do.
The toughest conference this year.
I agree.
But I think that Auburn has just gotten kind of shaky towards the end of. I mean, I would say overall they had the best regular season, but they've lost 3 of the last 4 games. They ended up beating Ole Miss, but they looked very unimpressive in that game. And I'm not saying they're not a 1 seed. They do deserve to be a 1 seed. But of all the 1 seeds, I think Auburn might be the weakest right now. Duke might also be the weakest, I think you can argue, because we don't know how healthy Cooper Flagg really is. Even though he's going to end up playing, we don't know how healthy he really is. And they might just be giving that impression. And we don't really know exactly how healthy he's really going to be. But look, I think Florida seems, a lot of people are really big on Florida, it seems like. And it has a lot to do with the fact that they ended up winning the SEC. And they do have, from what I've seen, it seems like when you look at the futures on DraftKings, it seems like Auburn has the best odds from last I checked. It seemed like Auburn has the best odds. I wouldn't take that bet.
Well, so
let's
talk about Auburn for a second. So Auburn, the way, also besides the North Carolina thing, the way that this tournament was decided was also very odd. So Auburn is the 1 seed. Louisville and Creighton is the 8-9 matchup. Now, that's the first game on Thursday. Now, I think that Louisville also, I don't understand how Louisville was an 8. Louisville went to the ACC final and whatever. But if Louisville win that game, it's Auburn versus Louisville in Kentucky. The game is at Kentucky's arena. So Auburn is a 1 seed that's going to play a road game in the second round if Louisville win.
Yeah.
So that was odd. Another thing I thought was Michigan won the Big Ten tournament and then were a 5. And they get UC San Diego, who's everybody's pick. Now, I want to say I do a show on Saturday mornings called Weekend Winners, and I pick a lock every week. I won't be releasing one before this game, but every single person now every year that there's a 12-5 upset, normally every year. Every single person this year is hot on UC San Diego. Normally, when there's a 12-5 upset, it's not the team that everyone is hot on. It almost never happens. Michigan -2.5 would be my absolute lock of the week if I was doing Weekend Winners. Every single person is hot on UC San Diego. Normally, the public dogs die. Normally. Whenever there's a public dog that people like, they normally don't always pan out. And I think Michigan is way better than a 5. I like Michigan big in that one. I don't know about big, but I think they'll cover the spread. And another team I watch out for, I have Iowa State going to the Final Four. I think they're a really good team. I think they're really well coached. Have you seen TJ Osselberger, by the way, Iowa State's head coach?
Have I seen him? No.
Yeah, he does. Well, you'll see him during the tournament. He does not miss an arm day. He's almost coming out of his shirt every game. But they play Ole Miss in the second round. That's where I'm most worried about Iowa State going to the Final Four. I think Ole Miss under Chris Beard is a really good team. Chris Beard obviously is a heavy hitter. Iowa State has a pretty significant injury that they kept out. Did you see this? Iowa State didn't announce the injury till after the selection show. That was smart.
Yeah. What exactly was it? I do know they have an injury.
They have a significant injury, but they didn't announce it until after the selection show. See, because it could have affected their seeding. So
okay,
it was pretty good. But we know that, listen, Ole Miss is coached by Chris Beard. He's a heavy hitter, and he likes, to beat up on vulnerability. So Iowa State could be vulnerable there. So Ole Miss might not be that bad of a pick, but I do have Iowa State going through. And I would watch out for New Mexico, too. They have one of the best point guards in the country. They're going to go against Michigan State in the second round, but if they win their first game against Marquette. But I would watch out for them, too, to be a team that could make a run.
I have New Mexico beating Marquette in the first round.
I do as well. And then I have New Mexico losing to Michigan State.
Yeah. I actually have Michigan getting past UC San Diego and losing to Texas A&M.
I have Michigan getting past. I have the same thing, Texas A&M, and I'm a little worried about Yale. Yale have made an upset. I have Texas A&M actually in the Elite Eight because I have them beating Auburn.
Here's the thing with Texas A&M. I think that they're either going to lose in the first round to Yale or they're going to make the Final Four. I feel like one of those two things is going to happen with A&M this year.
I'd agree with that. I mean, this is a year where I think that people are going to be pretty scared, and I didn't really go all chalk, but to go chalk, a lot of people want to pick upsets and stuff, but there's a big difference. There's a big difference this year. I think a bigger gap between the haves and have-nots in college basketball this year than normal. I mean, I
think there's always a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots in college basketball than people would like to admit.
Right, but I mean, this year I just think there's so many where people are scared to put. I could see, I only have one seed, that's Houston, in my Final Four, but I would not be, shocked, or I would not be surprised in the least if it was 4 1 seeds.
No, I would not be surprised.
It never happens, but I would not be shocked.
I agree. In terms of now, we could also talk a little bit about the 2 seeds, Alabama, Michigan State, St. John's, and Tennessee. Alabama, I am worried about Alabama. I mean, actually, I think all those teams are good, but I am somewhat worried about all of them in different ways. I think the weakest one of all the 2 seeds probably is Michigan State. And Alabama's probably the strongest, although I think you can make a good case for Tennessee. Alabama is a great offensive team. They are statistically the best offensive team in college basketball. They're also statistically one of the worst defensive teams. And in fairness, both of those numbers are very inflated because of their style of play. They have a lot of possessions. They play very fast paced. So it may look a little bit better than it really, or worse than it really is on both sides of the ball. I think that the 2 seeds are all good teams, but they're not as complete as the 1 seeds. Like, I think Houston is, and we can talk about Houston a little more, but I think Houston is a very complete team. I think that the 2 seeds are all very good teams, but they're just not all that. There's just a lot of noticeable flaws in their games.
Well, I'll give you, as someone who took Alabama to win the title, I completely agree what you said about the numbers being inflated. Here's where I would be most worried about Alabama. Now, I have Vanderbilt beating St. Mary's in the first round, but let's say that St. Mary's beats Vanderbilt.
Actually,
let's say that St. Mary's wins that game for the sake of argument. St. Mary's plays at the 130th pace in college basketball, one of the slowest paces. If Alabama takes on St. Mary's, would Alabama be able to win a game where if St. Mary's could set a slow pace? Because they can't. Their pace is first in the nation. So my worry for them is almost more in that second round game. Could they stumble there in a slow pace game that could take them out? If the shots don't fall for Alabama, they will lose a game. That's just they don't. I agree that it's inflated about their defense, but they don't have the defense to win a game where the shots don't fall. That's just a fact, and it doesn't matter if it's in the first round against Robert Morris or if it's against Duke. It doesn't matter. They cannot win a game if their shots don't fall.
No, I totally agree. Although the question is, you're right. Like if St. Mary's sets the pace of the game and makes it a slow pace game. Alabama's first, right? Are they first?
Yeah, number 1.
They're number 1. Okay. I would venture to now here's the question I would have, and this would be more pro Alabama. I would venture to guess that it's more likely that Alabama will force St. Mary's to play a fast paced game than it is that St. Mary's will force Alabama to play a slow paced game.
Well, that would only happen if Alabama took a lead, though, first.
Right, then if Alabama were to take a lead.
I agree with that sentiment, too. It's just, I agree with it, and I picked Alabama to win the whole thing. I'm just saying that's where I would be worried. That's a game I would be – I would not feel – if they play St. Mary's, I would not feel 100% going into that game that Alabama can win.
Yeah. I think that's true. I mean, I think that's basically true about almost everybody. Now, another team that I think, now we didn't talk about them yet, but another team that I think is just really overseeded is Kentucky. Kentucky, I don't think Kentucky's a 3 seed. I think they are seeded way too high. I think a lot of this is just brand bias. The team has gotten progressively worse throughout the season. I just think they're very inconsistent, and they don't play good defense at all. Their defense has been terrible. Kentucky's I haven't liked what I've seen from Kentucky late in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that they got a favorable draw too. They got Troy in the first round. Then second round, they probably would play Illinois. Illinois is a 6 seed, yes, but if you remember, Illinois just a few weeks ago played Duke at Madison Square Garden and lost by more than 50. So Illinois is not this.
Yeah,
I think they're probably the weakest 6 seed. Then I have Kentucky going past Troy, past Illinois, losing to Tennessee. I just think Tennessee, which we said we were going to talk about more, I think Tennessee has the best defense in the country. I think it's better than St. John's because they're playing a harder opponent as well than St. John's were. But I agree on Kentucky. I also just think that the SEC was so strong. I mean, there's a couple of things, like, for instance, people said, oh, it's amazing the SEC got 14 teams in. Well, it's also easy when you have 30 teams in a conference now to get 14 teams in. So, yeah. But the SEC was by far the best. The SEC is done a complete 180, where actually you could argue now that the Big Ten is the best football conference and the SEC is the best basketball conference, which you would never imagine 10 years ago. But I agree on Kentucky, but I think they also got a favorable draw. I just think that now they have Houston and Tennessee in there as their 1-2, so I don't see them getting past that. But I can definitely see them getting past the 2. And I agree that they got lucky with the draw and they shouldn't have been there. But if we're going to go also defense, so I think will probably have St. John's going quite far. I have them going out in the second round because of this. First of all, they're the worst free throw shooting team I've ever seen at any level. Their free throws are terrible. The other thing is St. John's cannot shoot the ball from 3-point range. They're really good from mid-range, but they can't shoot the ball from 3-point range, and they're not a good shooting team overall, but they're the best offensive rebounding team in college basketball. If they go against Kansas in the second round, who has Hunter Dickinson, who's always a presence under the basket, can they rebound at the level that they need to win a game? I don't know. And I think that free throw shooting in March is so important, and they're just so bad at it.
Yeah, I mean, they are an atrocious 3-point shooting team. I mean, look, St. John's is one of those teams where it's like they're really superior to everybody else in some ways and also really, really vulnerable in other ways. I mean, they're great in the sense of their defense. They have one of the best defenses in college basketball. I would say top 5. The number of teams that even arguably have better defenses than St. John's, I could count on one hand. And great rebounding. And they have some really, really good players that can do different things. The problem is they're not a good shooting team, and they're an atrocious 3-point shooting team. And in fairness, there's a lot of really bad 3-point shooting teams in college basketball. I think we were talking about this on Sunday during the stream, but like college basketball is so noticeably different than the NBA because there's just like the shooting is just so much worse. And that's a pretty common thing in college basketball for teams to not be able to shoot threes. The problem is that once you face teams that can shoot threes and can exploit that weakness, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And the foul shooting, yeah, I agree. The foul shooting is going to be a big problem with St. John's. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. That the foul shooting for St. John's is going to be a really big problem. Outside of R.J. Lewis, nobody on St. John's can shoot threes. Outside of R.J. Lewis, he's the only one, and that I think could be a problem. So R.J. Lewis really, really has to be on in order for St. John's to shoot the ball well from 3. Yep. I mean, the good thing about St. John's is that they're not exactly reliable they're not overly reliant on shooting threes.
Right.
Similar, like Alabama is very overly reliant on their offense, you can argue.
Right.
And that they really need to make shots they really need to be on offensively in order to win.
Correct.
I don't think that's true about St. John's as much. Kadari Richmond, I think, is a really, really good player, but he can't shoot threes. He's horrible. He's a horrible three-point shooter. He's shooting 18% from three, and he's a terrible foul shooter. And this is a guard. So I think that's going to be a bit of a problem Zuby Ejiofor is a great player, but he can't shoot foul shots. He can't shoot a foul shot to save his life. He's like the Dwight Howard of college basketball right now.
Right.
But there's a lot going for St. John's too. There's a lot going for St. John's. I do want to get into it a little later. I do want to get into them winning the Big East in just a minute. But another great defensive team, I think, is Tennessee. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Tennessee. I would say Tennessee is almost like the reverse Alabama in a sense. They play much slower. I don't know where they rank in terms of pace, but they play much slower pace than Alabama does, and are great on defense, but like not as great on offense. If anything, they're more like St. John's than they're almost like a lot more like St. John's than Alabama is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think they're always a good team. I mean, and Rick Barnes is a great coach, and they've won so many big games this year. I completely agree with them being a 2 seed. They're the best team. I have them. They're the best defensive team, and I have them going out in the Elite Eight to Houston, which is nothing to be sad about if that happens, because I think Houston are one of the better teams in the country. And yeah, I could see it, but I could certainly see, Houston has to play Gonzaga in the second round. So let's for the sake of argument say that Houston gets picked off. I could completely see Tennessee making a Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, because usually Gonzaga loses in the second or third round, and I think Houston is. I think Houston's really. Although I think that, like I said, Gonzaga is seated a little low. And usually I think they're overrated, but this year I think they're very much underrated. I think Tennessee is definitely one of. I really do like Tennessee. I really do like Tennessee a lot. Another team people are talking a lot about is Maryland. And Maryland's a good. I think Maryland is good. They're a good team. The problem is they don't have much depth. But they do look very good. They just don't have any depth. I have Maryland losing to Florida in the Sweet 16.
I have them losing in the first round to GCU.
Oh, you have Maryland losing right to Grand Canyon.
Yeah. I've got a 12. I have a 12-13 matchup. I have Grand Canyon playing. I have Grand Canyon in the Sweet 16 because I have them playing Colorado State in the next round.
Yeah,
another team that I think could have been seated in a different position.
So you have okay. So you have St. John's. By the way, can we just talk about St. John's finally won the Big East? It's the first time in 25 years that St. John's has won the Big East. I was ecstatic about it because I'm a St. John's fan. I think a lot of people are talking about like Rick Pitino's legacy and all that. I mean, we all know Rick Pitino is one of the all-time great head coaches. He has built up multiple different programs, and I think that what Rick Pitino has done with St. John's is completely remarkable, because St. John's was, for most of my lifetime, sort of an irrelevant program, or sort of became irrelevant. They were like historically very good, but sort of became irrelevant in a sense. And within just 2 years, Rick Pitino completely just brought the program back. And I think he deserves a world of credit for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they should have made the tournament last year. And we had, if you remember, we had a discussion on this show last year about how everybody, was upset with Rick Pitino basically, criticizing Rick Pitino because he ripped his players in the press conference. And if you remember, St. John's won like 10 games in a row after that press conference.
Mhm.
So if obviously I think you've seen the video when he was doing the Providence, when he was doing the halftime speech at Providence and they came back to win. And so he's also like, I like Pitino because he's also like a relic of the past sense of coaching that a lot of people have thought is irrelevant, is unworkable now with the transfer portal, basically tough coaching. And it is just proof that it works, as I think Danny Hurley is as well. But I also saw a prominent sports writer in New York said, when you talk about the most successful stories in New York City basketball this season, you start and finish with NYU athletics, Final Four bound. Others may say they are on the doorstep in the area, but only one has achieved it. And that was from New York sports writer Rico Bosco, who is a prominent, who also said 2 years ago on March 20th, 2023, the day that Rick Pitino was hired, he said, facilities stink. Best players in the area leave New York City. Garden doesn't draw. Haven't made conference semis since 2000. How do you fix that? Hire a 70-year-old man with no successor plan? Pitino will make them a story and draw attention, but this is a stopgap.
Wow, that is a hell of a take. I mean, okay. I mean, I don't really feel the need to respond to that tweet because the results speak for themselves. But how do you not consider that, like, first of all, 70 is not that old anymore, especially for a head coach. And Rick Pitino seems fairly young for somebody who's 70 years old.
Yeah.
In fact, it's the old coaches that are the ones that are winning more often.
Right. He's a college coach in his 70s, so theoretically he could be dating a 23-year-old. But I think Saban, all joke aside, I think Saban won at least one national championship after turning 70. So there's a bunch of guys. And also, I think it's just also proof of how kind of crazy we got over so many things that I think are ridiculous. For instance, they tried to push Rick Pitino out of the sport for something that, okay, you know, I really had no problem with. If you look at Will Wade at McNeese State, he was pushed out of LSU for something that's legal now, recruiting that's legal now. And you look at these guys who are successful off the court stuff. I mean, you could even go back. Obviously, we're both big college football fans. I mean, look how successful Hugh Freeze has been in recent years at a lesser program, who was kicked out. Hugh Freeze, kind of very similar to Rick Pitino's situation. And so I also think guys should take it. Like, people should take chances on these coaches. Will Wade, I think, will get a job at a bigger program. And some of these people are so afraid to touch guys. Michael Kay was telling a story about maybe 30 years ago or 20 years ago. He told Fordham that they should hire Bobby Knight and when he was jobless, and Fordham said no, they wouldn't touch him because of this and that. And Bobby Knight ended up going to Texas Tech and was successful at Texas Tech. A lot of people are scared to touch these guys. Chris Beard is another one at Ole Miss because of off-court stuff. And you look at this, and those ADs should look at stuff like this and not be scared of that stuff. I mean, this was not, you know, what Rick Pitino did was not, this is not a crime. This was not something that people should be pushed out for. And here he is, and it's a success story. And he's been successful at every single place that he's gone. Kentucky, you know, the Celtics not so much, and the Knicks not so much. But when he came back and went to Louisville, Iona, even in Greece, he was successful here. And he is going to be so. Just also tidbit: if Arkansas beats Kansas Saturday night, you get Pitino versus Calipari, and the reason that's significant is John Calipari and Rick Pitino have both brought three different schools: Memphis, Kentucky, and I forget who the third team was for Calipari, but Pitino was Providence, Kentucky, and Louisville to the Final Four. And so, if Rick Pitino wants to eclipse John Calipari and bring a fourth team to the Final Four, he might have to beat him to do it.
Yeah. And by the way, I think it's totally ridiculous. Speaking of like what Rick Pitino did, I think it's so ridiculous that in college sports that we just pretend that championships didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like it is so ridiculous to make the claim
Right.
that for the NCAA to put an asterisk next to the 2013 championship. And I know I'm biased because I won the bracket challenge that year.
Right.
In high school. You probably remember that, or maybe you don't.
Yeah. Also, just to sort of not to pull you down from your high, but also the next year it was won by two girls who wouldn't know what a basketball was if it hit them in the face. So it's not always the biggest, but yes,
that is true.
Yeah,
that is true.
Well, one of the big reasons that those girls won that too was because they were the only people, just because they didn't know. Everyone who was good at basketball had Kentucky, winning the whole thing. And they actually had Kentucky going out because nobody thought Kentucky was going to go out.
Right. Kentucky that year, I mean, the funny thing is, like, if you just look at different college basketball programs, some teams have totally overachieved or underachieved based on expectations. Like UConn in the past since 2014. So since 2014, UConn has won 3 times. Within that time span, Kentucky has won 0. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like Kentucky would have won a lot more because they were heavy favorites so much more often. And a lot of that is just a product of like the whole one and done thing. I mean, people talk about how dominant UConn was last year and they were heavy favorites to win it all. I mean, that 10 years ago, that's what Kentucky was. Except they ended up losing. But that Kentucky team with Karl Anthony Towns, Willie Cauley-Stein, the Harrison twins, Devin Booker, that was a great team. That really was a great team.
They absolutely. And they I feel like they were sort of like the Patriots, like when they lost the Giants. Like if the Patriots had lost at some point in the season, they probably would have won the Super Bowl. I just think that the undefeated thing was so big. Just like I think if Kentucky had lost in the conference tournament or something, they probably would have won the whole thing. Sometimes that undefeated moniker is a detriment when you're, it adds that pressure.
And by the way, if they had beaten Wisconsin, I think they probably would have ended up beating Duke.
Also that game was the Wisconsin Duke game was sort of I'll say this, the Wisconsin Duke game was reffed very differently in the second half than it was in the first half. That championship game from years ago. But I mean, those are teams. I mean, this is going to be like, if people who maybe have short-term memory don't remember also, like UConn, I don't think we've seen 2 tournaments where a team has, I mean, UConn was never close to losing a game ever at the tournament in the last 2 years. Like we've never had a tournament where a team has not even been close to losing a game that's won. I mean, UConn were never even close. So this is going to be really interesting. It's a great parody. I mean, it's, I just think it's the best time of the year. I am more biased to college football, but I think that it's so tough to beat March Madness. And there's also it's also so much easier for a small school or a team that's not as good to win a basketball game than it is a football game. So, that just adds it. But this is going to be the best time of the year. And I think this is going to be a really, really interesting tournament in so many ways because there isn't that team. I mean, UConn was that team for the last 2 years that there's not, you knew going into the tournament. I don't think anyone's going to beat them. And this year we don't have anyone even close to that. You could see a lot of teams that could go out earlier that could win the whole thing. If you look at all the ones, like we were just talking about it, all the 1 seeds and the 2 seeds. I mean, everybody seems to be really big on Florida, but I don't think Florida's going to win at all because it just seems like everybody's too big on them right now. I agree. I think besides UConn, which we've already said is a outlier of everything. Normally, I feel like teams that the public is in love with just always have that hiccup. I mean, the Fab Five, obviously, you go back to those days, and North Carolina State, Houston obviously was the team that was the public loved. They were 10-point favorites to beat North Carolina State in that game. I've never been a big public the public dog, which probably doesn't speak to Duke. I mean, Duke, if you remember, the public was in love with, when you talk about going to brackets, was in love with that R.J. Barrett, Zion Williamson team. And that team could have lost to UCF in the second round. They could have lost to, I think it was Maryland in the third round, and then they ended up losing to Michigan State. But that was like the public darling of the year that year. And they were never they could have got eliminated in the second round. They were never really that close to winning a title. But the public loved them. So you have a lot of teams like that. Obviously, the Kentucky team we talked about. The public is in love with a lot of guys that sometimes that just doesn't work out.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually just how it works in college basketball. I mean, the reason I like Houston so much is because they're a great defensive team and they're a good shooting team. They can actually shoot threes. So they're all of the things that St. John's has, plus all of the things that St. John's longs for.
Right.
At
right.
Houston.
Agreed.
Not to make it all about St.
Yeah.
John's.
No, agreed.
All right. I do want to talk a little bit about the Knicks. Brunson is out till the end of the month. I was at the Knicks game last night, and they destroyed Miami after getting off to kind of a slow start. I don't know how much of the game you got a chance to watch.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
Okay. Without Brunson, the thing with the Knicks, though, is I think they're probably locked in to the 3 seed.
Yeah, they are.
I am really not worried about them dropping, and I've given up hope of them catching Boston.
No.
That's why I just don't think this Brunson injury. I think the team is substantially worse without Brunson. I just don't think it's going to affect the outcome that much.
No, I agree, and also it doesn't really matter if they catch Boston or not, because whether you're a 2 or a 3, they're still going to have to play Boston in the second round. So that really doesn't matter. I mean, I thought a few things. The first thing that I really have thought is if they're talking about, I mean, obviously he's not even going to get close, but if you talk about if the MVP was really what the name was, who's most valuable to the team, then Jimmy Butler almost should win the MVP, because the Warriors have been 14-2 since Jimmy Butler got acquired. And the Heat, as you saw last night, have been awful. I mean, the Heat are terrible. The Eastern Conference play-in is an absolute joke. All 4 teams have a losing record, and not like one game under 500. I mean, if you look at the Eastern Conference right now, the Hawks are 32-36. They're the 7. The Magic are 32-37. The Bulls and the Heat, who are both right now be playoff teams, what they consider them play-in, are 29-39. And so also those teams, all 4 of those teams, by the way, would not be in the play-in in the West.
Yeah, all 4. Yeah, it's a total laughing stock, and this has been going on for such a long time. Like most things in sports are sort of cyclical, and like we were just talking about how like the SEC has sort of flipped from like a football to a basketball conference, and now you can argue the Big Ten is better. Everything in sports changes a lot, except this. Like in our lifetimes, like I feel like this is the only thing that just hasn't changed.
Yeah, I mean, and so just to put that in context, the team that has the 7 seed Atlanta right now has the same record as Phoenix and 1 game less in the win column than Dallas, which are 2 franchises who are quickly heading into the abyss of being awful. I mean, Dallas obviously traded away their whole team and been hurt by injuries. Phoenix is a joke with the players that they have, the fact that they're 32-37. But so the Eastern Conference is bad. I think also like the Knicks versus the Pistons. The Pistons are decent, but I still think that they don't have enough talent to beat the Knicks. But I have no I have no confidence in the Knicks going anywhere. I think it's going to be what it's been for the last 3 years, which is a second round exit. I think they beat in Detroit. Whether they beat them I would probably take them in 6 right now. And then you're going to have to play Boston. And I don't see any chance that the Knicks could beat Boston in a 7-game series at all. And let's be real here. Let's talk about this because it's just honestly what it is. Now, obviously, when you look at what what the Mavericks gave up or what the Lakers gave up for Doncic, it makes every other trade look worse. But 5 first-round picks. 5 first-round picks. That's what they gave the Nets for Mikal Bridges. He has not been worth 5 first-round picks. That's just an honest assessment.
Well, Bridges, I think, is just very on and off. He was great last night.
Yeah, but they gave 5 first-round picks for him. So you can't be on and off when you give up 5 first-round picks. And they've also had a couple of issues. I think a big thing, and they weren't going to pay him this money, so it doesn't matter. But I think the biggest loss that the Knicks had, now a lot of people were talking about, Karl Anthony Towns, and that trade, they lost Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. I don't think that's affected them. I think the biggest loss, and I'm not advocating for that they should have paid him, but it's just a fact of life. Their biggest loss, I think, was Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't. I agree completely because it affected their defense a whole lot. Like, I like this Knicks team better than I like last year's Knicks team. But even though they're probably going to end up being seeded a little, they were lower this year than they were last year. But I think that their offense is much better, but their defense has gotten so much worse.
Yeah, it has. And I also just want to put into context, even though we've been talking bad about the Knicks, how the New York sports fan thinks, because the Knicks have been getting not good. The callers on sports radio have been very negative toward the Knicks. The Knicks, when they won 40 games, even though they were the 2 seed last year, when the Knicks won 40 games this year, it was the quickest they had gotten to 40 games since 1996. So they're having their best regular season since 1996, and there's still a lot of negativity around that. And I think the reason that there's a lot of negativity around that is because of even though the East is a weak conference, it's because of the 2 teams looming at the 1 and 2, and especially because of the Boston Celtics. Even I would actually be way, way, way less scared of playing Cleveland than I would of Boston. I think Boston is better than Cleveland.
I think that Cleveland is probably better built as a regular season team, and Boston is better as a postseason team.
Correct.
Which is pretty common, which we see a lot. I mean, I don't think that, but the bottom line is, I don't think the Knicks can be either team.
No.
And people and the reason is because their defense. The biggest reason is probably because their defense isn't good enough. That's their biggest reason. I mean, with Hartenstein was a huge loss. And the Knicks were not allowed to match the offer, from my understanding, with Oklahoma City.
Yeah, but I don't think they would have anyway.
No, they wouldn't have. Because Towns is great on offense, and he's not great on defense. He's not a great defensive player. There's also a lot of teams in the West that I don't think the Knicks would be able to beat in a 4-game series. I mean, I think maybe they'd have a shot against. I think maybe they'd have a shot against the Lakers and Denver, but I don't even think they'd win. I don't even think they'd beat either of those teams in a 7-game series. I don't think they beat Houston in a 7-game series. I think there's a lot of teams, and Oklahoma City certainly not. I just think the Knicks are a very good team. The problem is there's just too many. There's just some teams I don't think they can get past. And one thing people keep always talking about and harping on is their record against top teams.
It's not good. Yeah.
That we keep hearing about.
Yeah, agreed. And that, yeah. So I think it's just going to be the same thing. Second round exit. I mean, they also did nothing at the trade deadline. So they don't. I would have maybe took a flyer out on Jimmy Butler, but I think that it's just going to be that again. And the Knicks sort of have this. The Knicks are a younger team than the Rangers, the hockey Rangers. But when you look at the Rangers, they sort of in the last few years have been on this treadmill of going to the conference finals, not having enough talent to get there, and it just happens and happens. And the Knicks are sort of in the same way, where they're getting to the second round, having a good regular season, getting to the second round, going on this treadmill. And now this year the Rangers have fallen down. I mean, when does the Knicks window sort of get close to closing? Because they're in this same window, and you've got, look at the age of some of the stars on Boston. I mean, they're not going away anytime soon. So I feel like the Knicks are really going to have to do something, whether it's figure out, maybe Giannis, and I think to get Giannis, who it seems like could be traded, they're probably going to have to give up Cat. So I think the Knicks are going to have a lot of questions in the offseason. I don't think they're going to make it past that. A team that I do really just want to quick out is a lot of people mention that this Luka Doncic Laker trade was really good for the future, which it is. And I think Oklahoma City are the best team in the West. But I don't know why, if Doncic is on, the Lakers, I think, can get to the finals. If Doncic is on and you have LeBron playing at his level right now, they're going to be a really tough team to defend. Tough team to defend. So I think the Lakers might be a team to watch out for. I mean, they've been playing better since they got Doncic. A lot of people thought that this was a trade that sort of meant that, we don't need to rely on LeBron anymore. But now you have Doncic and LeBron, and Doncic is playing at a decent level. Obviously, LeBron's had a little bit of injuries, but I see them as a team that could threaten people. And I gave this pick out on Weekend Winners. I also think Golden State's a team that could threaten people. They have a winning DNA. They have Jimmy Butler now. They've been playing way better. I think the West is going to be a really a gauntlet.
Yeah. And not only that, it also just takes a lot of pressure off LeBron, who is now 40 years old.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of pressure off him. They don't have to be overly reliant on him.
Right. And you have, and it's easier. It's good too when you have LeBron who can play inside. So then, the defenders are going to go to LeBron, and then you have this great outside shooter. It's going to be tough to figure them out. And it's, you can't really you don't want either LeBron or Doncic being guarded one-on-one. So I think they're going to be a tough team, and I think the Warriors too. I just think the West is going to be such a gauntlet, and then I think Boston is going to come out of the East. So I think the playoffs are going to be great, but I just think the Knicks are right now just in this perpetual hamster wheel. I mean, which we knew before the season that even with Bridges, they probably weren't talented enough. I don't think anybody thought that Cleveland was going to be this good. But we've known that. And so I just think that after this season, if they go out in the second round again, even though it's good for us as Knicks fans who've never seen anything good, they have to reevaluate and make some kind of change.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So on that note, that's our show this week. I'll be back next week. This is Moving the Goalposts. See you next week, everybody.